Hey, Coach Crazy Cat here for part 2 in Samuel. Sorry about that. My grandparents had literally just started to do something for me, and I couldn't let them sit to finish the reading. So we were in 1 Samuel 11, and there's this battle that has been announced with Jabesh Gilead, and they've been threatened. But what's interesting is that at this time, they didn't expect people to team up because everybody in Israel was doing what was right in their own eyes, and judges would be raised up in a particular tribe, but people didn't really team up and work together to clear up a problem. So they didn't expect that to happen here. But when Saul hears about it, he's going to take care of the problem. So we had here in verse 6, the spirit of Elohim came upon Saul mightily when he heard the words, and his displeasure burned greatly. And he took a yoke of a cattle and cut them in pieces and sent them throughout all the border of Yisra'eel by the hands of the messengers, saying, whoever does not go out with Saul and Samuel to battle, let this be done to his cattle. And the fear of Yehova fell on the people, and they came out as one man. They came out as one man. This is a new happening. They had not come out as one man since Joshua. A couple tribes here and a couple tribes there would help each other in the book of Judges, but not the whole land. But here we have the whole land coming. He mustered them in Bezek, and the children of Yisrael were 300,000, and the men of Yehuda 30,000. And they said to the messengers who came, say this to the men of Jabesh Gilead, tomorrow, by the time the sun is hot, you shall have help. Then the messengers came and informed the men of Jabesh, and they rejoiced. So the men of Jabesh said, tomorrow we come out to you, and you shall do to us whatever seems good to you. And it came to be on the next day that Saul put the people in 3 companies, and they came into the midst of the camp and in the morning watch and struck Ammon until the heat of the day. And it came to be that those who left were scattered, so no 2 of them were left together. And the people said to Samuel, who said, Saul rule over us? Bring them in. So we put them to death. But Saul said, no man is to be put to death for this day, for today Yehova has wrought deliverance in Yisra'eel. And Samuel said to the people, come and let us go to Gilgal and renew the reign there. And all the people went to Gilgal, and there they set up Saul to reign before Yehova in Gilgal, and there they slaughtered slaughterings of peace offerings before Yehova. And Saul rejoiced in all the men of Yisrael very greatly. So here we have Saul is established. And now, you remember the last time he was set up, you had kind of these complainers. Well, Saul didn't say anything to them. He just let them kind of like say what they had to say. But now everything's been restored, and everybody's aligned under the king, Saul. All right, so chapter 12. Well, now we get a very stern warning from Samuel. And you'll remember in the books of Moses and again in Judges, Joshua and Moses have warned them several times, a reminder of the Mosaic covenant, that if you don't follow God and you stray away and you intermarry with these other people, you're going to start worshiping their gods, and I'm not going to like it, and bad things are going to happen. And they don't listen over and over. But here we're going to have Samuel's take on the same warning, which is important. And Samuel said to all of Yisrael, look, I have listened to your voice and all that you said to me, and have now look, the sovereign is walking before you, and I am old and gray, and look, my sons are with you, and I walk before you from my youth to this day. Look, here I am. Witness against me before Yehova and before his anointed, whose ox I have taken, whose dog I have taken, or whom I have oppressed, whom I have abused, or from whose hand have I received any bribe with which you blind my eyes, then I restore it to you. And they said, you have not oppressed us or abused us, nor have you taken any bribe from anyone's hand. So he said to them, Yehova is a witness against you, and his anointed is a witness today, that you have found naught in my hand. And they answered, he is a witness. And Samuel said to the people, it is Yehova who appointed Mosheh and Aharon, who brought up your fathers from the land of Mitsrayim. And now stand still, so that I judge you before Yehova concerning all the righteous acts of Yehova, which he did to you and your fathers. When Jacob had come to Mitsrayim, and your fathers cried out to Yehova, then Yehova said to Mosheh and Aharon, who brought your fathers out of Mitsrayim, and made them dwell in this place. But they forgot Yehova their Elohim, so he sold them into the hand of Sisera, commander of the army of Atsor, and into the hand of the Philistines, and into the hand of the children of Moab, and they fought against them. And they cried out to Yehova and said, we have sinned because we have forsaken Yehova and served the Baals from the Ashtaroth, and now deliver us from the hand of our enemies, and we serve you. And Yehova said to Yerubba, Bedan, Yiphtah, and Samuel, and delivered you out of the hand of your enemies round about, and you dwelt in safety. So this is the period of the judges and the rulers. And when you saw the Nahash sovereign of Ammon came against you, you said to me, no, but let a sovereign reign over us when Yehova, your Elohim, was your sovereign. So you can see here that God was their sovereign, but they're asking for a human king instead. And now here's the sovereign whom you have chosen and whom you have asked, and see, Yehova has set a sovereign over you. If you fear Yehova and serve him and obey his voice and not rebel against the command of Yehova, then both you and the sovereign shall follow Yehova your Elohim. But if you do not obey the voice of Yehova and shall rebel against the mouth of Yehova, then the hand of Yehova shall be against you as it was against your fathers. And now stand and see this great matter which Yehova does before your eyes. Is it not the wheat harvest? Let me call it sends thunder and rain. Know then and see your evil is great when you have done which you have done in the eyes of Yehova in asking for yourselves a sovereign. And Samuel called to Yehova, and Yehova sent thunder and rain that day, and all the people greatly feared Yehova and Samuel. And all the people said to Samuel, pray for your servants to Yehova your Elohim, that we do not die, for we have added to all of our sins this evil of asking for ourselves a sovereign. And Samuel said to the people, for we have added, pray for your servants, for we have added to our sins for this evil. So Samuel's taken them through the entire history. And he's like, even though God's been really good to you and kept his end of the bargain, you haven't kept yours. And now you've asked for a sovereign as well. And it's going to end up being not good for you. But they keep just doing it. And I think about myself and how many times I'm warned about things and then still keep doing it. Crazy, isn't it? And Samuel said to the people, do not fear. You have done all this evil. Only do not turn aside from following Yehova, and you shall serve Yehova with your heart. And do not turn aside after worthless matters which do not profit or deliver, for they are worthless. For Yehova would not cast away his people for his great name's sake, seeing it has pleased Yehova to make you his people. Also, as for me, far be it from me ceasing to pray for you, but I shall teach you the good and the straight way. Only fear Yehova, and you shall serve him in truth with all your heart, for consider what marvels he has done for you. But if you persist in doing evil, both you and your sovereign are consumed. So this is a big warning. It's at the end of his life, and he's letting them know that they should not go and worship the locals, the Baals, but they're going to do it again, even though here's the third person yet again warning them against it. And Saul had reigned for 2 years. So the beginning of 13, some Bibles have a number in there and some don't. Saul was X years old when he began to reign. It's not noted. He has to be old enough to have a son who's old enough to fight. So he's got to at least be in his 40s, because Jonathan is of fighting age, which would put him in his 20s. We don't know the exact age, and I don't know why it wasn't recorded, but it wasn't. But the important part here is that he had reigned over Israel for 2 years. So we've had that he's been raised up. He kind of sat there for a period of time, and then he teams everybody up, and they go fight on behalf of Jabesh Gilead. And then everybody's following him. And here, 2 years later, he's pulling together an army. So he chose for himself 3,000 men of Yisra'eel, and 2,000 were with Saul and Michmash, and in the mountains of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin, and the rest of the people he sent away, each to his tent. And Jonathan struck the watchpost of the Philistines that was in Geba, and the Philistines heard of it, and Saul blew with a shofar throughout the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. And all of Yisrael heard the news that Saul had stricken a watchpost of the Philistines, and also that Yisrael had become a stench to the Philistines, and the people were summoned to Saul at Gilgal. And the Philistines gathered to fight Yisrael, 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and people as numerous as the sands in the seashore. And they came up and encamped in Michmash, east of Beth-awen. And the men of Yisrael saw that they were in trouble, for the people were distressed, and the people hid in caves and thorny bushes and in rocks and in holes and in pits. And some Hebrews passed over the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. But Saul was still in Gilgal, all the people following him and trembling. And he waited for the 7 days, according to the appointment with Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. And Saul said, bring an ascending offering and a peace offering here to me. And he offered the ascending offering. And it came to be, as soon as he finished, that look, Samuel came. So he gave up waiting. He did not follow what God had told him to do. He didn't follow the rules from Samuel. And he says, I'm just going to do it myself. How many times do we do that? I do that a lot. And as soon as he did it, Samuel shows up and he's like, what have you done? And Saul defends himself, and he says, because I saw that the people were scattered, that you did not come, and the Philistines gathered, that I said the Philistines are going to come down to me at Gilgal, and I have not appeased the face of Yehova. So I felt compelled and offered an ascending offering. So here we have Saul taking things into his own hands, doing what he felt was right in his own eyes, which is never good. And we're supposed to be waiting for the Lord. And Samuel's going to respond and say, you have been foolish. You have not guarded the command of Yehova your Elohim, which he commanded you. For now Yehova would establish your reign over Yisra'eel forever, but now your reign is not going to stand. Yehova shall seek for himself a man after his own heart, and Yehova shall command him to be leader over his people, because you have not guarded what Yehova had commanded you. So it's a pretty big sin. And I think when I read this, I go, wow, that's a pretty harsh sentence for the first thing that he did. But it's a condition of the heart, doing what's right in your own eyes and realizing that, God wants you to do something different, but you're going to do what you want anyway, just because you're like, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway. And it's not a good thing. And the Lord's ways are not our ways. And sometimes he just wants us to wait. And if you go to Proverbs 3, 5-7, it talks about this. So trust in Yehova with all of your heart and lean not onto your own understanding. Know him in all of your ways, and he makes your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear Yehova and turn away from evil. So this is, waiting for the Lord, trusting in the Lord, knowing that he's going to do what he says he's going to do, and not trying to take things into our own hands. And because of this, Saul and Jonathan will ultimately end up getting cut off. But many years into the future, there's going to be a lot that happens between now and then, between David and Samuel. David and Saul. And Samuel arose and went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin, and Saul mustered the people who were present with him, 600 men. And Saul and Jonathan his son and the people who were present with him remained in Gibeah of Benjamin, while the Philistines camped at Michmash. And from the camp of the Philistines, raiders went out in 3 companies. The one company turned the way that leads to Ophrah, to the land of Saul, and another company turned toward the way of Beth Horon, and another company toward the valley of the border that overlooks the valley of Seboim towards the wilderness. Now no blacksmith could be found in the land of Yisra'eel, for the Philistines said, let the Hebrews make swords or spears. And all of Yisra'eel went down to the Philistines, each one to sharpen his plowshare and his mattocks, and his axe and his sickle. And the charge was a pim for the plowshares and the mattocks and the forks and the axles to set the points of the goat. And it came to be on the day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found on any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan, but they were found with Saul and Jonathan and his son, and the outpost of the Philistines went out to Michmash. So they've got this thing. So there had been a time of peace with the Philistines, but they wouldn't let the Philistines did all the metal work, and they wouldn't allow the children of Israel to do that. So they had a really hard time finding weapons, and they're about to enter into battle. And there's a lot of people who are afraid, except for Jonathan. So chapter 14, and it came to be one day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young men who bore his armor, come and let us go over to the outpost of the Philistines, which is on the other side. But he did not inform his father. And Saul remained in the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree at Migron, and the people were with him were about 600 men. So he's sitting in the shade, not really sure what to do. He's not willing to go out and fight. But his son, Jonathan, obviously had a bunch of faith, and off he goes. And Ahab, son of Ahitub, Ichabod. Remember, Ichabod was the son of Eli. Yeah, Eli the priest, who had lived. Son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of Yehova in Shiloh, was wearing a shoulder garment, and the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. And between the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the outpost of the Philistines, there was an edge of a rock on one side and an edge of the rock on the other side, and the name of the one was Botsitz, and the name of the other Seneh. And the one was on the north opposite of Michmash, and the other on the south opposite Gibeah. And Jonathan said to the young men who bore his armor, come and let us go over to the outpost of these uncircumcised. If so be, Yehova does work for us, for there is no hindrance for Yehova to save by many or by few. And his armor bearer said to him, do all that is in your heart, incline yourself, see, I am with you according to your heart. And Jonathan said, see, we are passing over to the men, show ourselves to them. If they say to us, wait until we come back to you, then we shall stand still in our place and not go to them. But if they say, come up to us, then we shall go up, for Yehova has given them into our hand, and this is the sign to us. And both of them disclosed themselves to the outposts of the Philistines. The Philistines said, see, the Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden. And the men of the outpost called Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, come, let us go up and teach you a lesson. Then Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, for Yehova has given them into the hand of Yisra'eel. So you can see here Jonathan's faith. He states the sign, how he had the sign, whether God gave it to him or he prayed about it. And he said, Father, if you want us to go, do this, and if not, do that, which is fine to do. God will give us directions if we wait for him. Waiting for the Lord is an important thing. Just think about Noah, how he built the world's largest yacht when no boat had ever sailed. So God could tell us what to do if we're willing to ask and wait. And Jonathan climbed up on his hands and knees with his armor bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer was putting them to death behind him. And that first smiting which Jonathan and his armor bearer struck was about 20 men in about half an acre of land. And there was trembling in the camp and in the field and among the people, and the outposts and the raiders also trembled, and the ground shook, and it became a trembling of Elohim. And the watchmen of Saul and Gibeah of Benjamin looked and saw the crowd melting away. And they went here and there. And Saul said to the people who were with him, please inspect and see who has gone from us. So they inspected and saw that Jonathan and his armor bearer were missing. And Saul said to Ahiah, bring the ark of Elohim here, for the ark of Elohim was with the children of Israel on that day. And it came to be while Saul talked to the priest, the noise was in the camp of the Philistines went on, and it became great. So Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. And Saul was called, and all the people who were with him, and they went to the battle. And see, every man's sword was against his neighbor, a very great confusion. And the Hebrews who were with the Philistines before that time, who went up with them into the camp, turned around, they too, to be with Yisra'eel, who were with Saul and Jonathan. And the men of Yisra'eel who had hidden in the mountains of Ephraim heard the Philistines fled, and they also pursued them in battle. Thus Yehova saved Yisra'eel that day, and the battle passed over to Beth-awen. And the men of Yisra'eel were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under an oath, saying, cursed be the man who eats food until evening, and I am avenged on my enemies. So this is just an interesting little dialogue. You got that Jonathan is willing to go up into battle. He prays to God, and he asks for a sign, and he's given the sign, and he goes up, and God gives them into his hand. But at the same time, you've got Saul here showing the bad part of his personality, where he's making everything about himself, and he's treating God like a genie in a bottle. He's saying, we're going to do these signs and symbols, like I'm going to tell everybody else not to eat, which is stupid because it makes them weak, instead of actually praying and waiting, which is what he was told to do. So you've got this curse. He puts out this curse that says nobody can eat, which is dumb when you've got men in battle. But anyway, whatever. So none of the people would eat. And they of all the land came into the woods, and there was honey on the ground, and the people came into the woods and saw the honey dripping, but no one put his hand, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard. So here Jonathan's been off fighting. Instead of sitting around under a pomegranate tree making stupid rules, Jonathan's been out taking care of business. He had not heard that his father made this oath, and he stretched his hand out the end of his rod that was on his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb and put it to his mouth, and his eyes lit up. And one of the people said, your father strictly took an oath of the people, saying, cursed be the man who eats food today. And the people were weary. And Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. Now see how my eyes lit up when I tasted a little bit of this honey. How much better if the people had well eaten today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found. For then would not the slaughter among the Philistines have been greater. And they struck the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ailon. So the people were very weary, and the people pounced on the spoil and took sheep and cattle and calves and slew them on the ground, and the people ate with the blood. And they told Saul, saying, look, the people are sinning against Jehovah by eating with the blood. And they said, you have acted treacherously. Roll a large stone to me today. And Saul said, scatter among the people and say to them, each one bring his ox near to me, and each one his sheep, and you shall slay them there and eat. And do not sin against Jehovah by eating with the blood. So every one of the people brought his ox that night and slew it there. And Saul brought a slaughter place to Jehovah. It was the first slaughter place he built to Jehovah. First slaughter place. That's interesting. I didn't see that before. So it was the first time he slaughters to Jehovah. Very interesting. And Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them in the morning light, and do not leave a man of them. But they said, do not do whatever seems good to you. But the priest said, let us draw near to Elohim here. And Saul asked of Elohim, should I go down after the Philistines? So he is going to ask this time, do you give them into the hands of Israel? But he did not answer him on that day. And Saul said, come over here, you chiefs of the people, and see what this sin was today. For as Jehovah lives, who saves Yisra'eel, though it be Jonathan my son, he shall certainly die. But not one among all the people answered them. And he said to Yisra'eel, you'll be on the one side of my son Jonathan, and I on the other. And the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. Then Saul said to Yehova, Elohim of Israel, give a perfect lot. And Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. And Saul said, cast lots between Jonathan and me. And Jonathan was taken. And Saul said to Jonathan, explain to me what you have done. And Jonathan explained, I tasted a little honey, the rod which is in my hand. See, let me die. So Jonathan here has heard, now what his father has said. And he's like, well, let me die then. And Saul answered, Elohim do more, and also for you shall certainly die, Jonathan. So this is actually a prophetic statement about Jonathan dying, which will happen in the future, but not today. He's going to get protected. But the people said to Saul, should Jonathan die, who has brought this great salvation in Yisra'eel? Far be it. As Jehovah lives, let not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he is wrought with Elohim this day. Thus the people ransomed Jonathan, and he did not die. And Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place, and Saul took reign over Yisra'eel and fought against his enemies round about, against Moab, against the children of Ammon, against Edom, against the sovereigns of Saboa, against the Philistines, and wherever he turned, he inflicted punishment. And he gathered an army and struck the Amalekites and delivered Yisra'eel from the hands of those who plundered them. And the sons of Saul were Jonathan, Yishwi, and Malchusha. And the names of his two daughters were the name of the first one, Merab, and the name of the younger, Michael. And the name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the commander of the army was Abner, son of Ner, uncle of Sha'ul. And Kish was the father of Sha'ul, and Ner, the son of Abner, was the son of Abiel. And there was a tough fighting against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any mighty man or any brave man, he took him for himself. So we have here a turn in Saul's character. He starts out and he seems to be pretty meek. He's like, why would you raise me up? But here 2 years later, he's kind of acting irrationally. I mean, why would you tell your men who were in battle to not eat and then threaten to kill your son? But then you send everybody else out to do the hard work, but then you take the glory for yourself whenever there's a mighty man. So there are chinks in the armor of Saul that are starting to come out, and we're going to see more of them as he starts to get paranoid about David, because he's lost his place. I mean, he didn't do what was right in God's eyes. He was not patient. He did not wait for him. And by not doing that, he's cut off his line from the future, and he isn't happy about it, and he's acting crazy. So with that, let's close in prayer. Father God, I just praise you for your beautiful word and for your lessons and for your love and your mercy and for the beautiful peace that comes when we spend time in your word and with you and in prayer, Father. I just praise you in all and for all. Amen. All right, God willing, we'll be back tomorrow continuing on, and we'll hear about David tomorrow. Be blessed.